No, but so Matt, your firm is basically investing on this thesis that the world is decentralized, that this technology stack or this blockchain technology will take over a lot of this coordination. You're talking of sovereignty of users over their data and entire economies that will really be driven by data. So maybe you can explain a little bit about how you think of this, what we generally refer to as Web3 landscape, and and your vision of this data economy.
Yeah. Okay. So I talked a little bit about our basic thesis about convergence a few minutes ago, but I was really struck actually just now by one of the things that Jason said around automation. Because I think if you think about what's been happening in the world, in the broad stroke of things for the last 60, 70, 100 years, I think what's actually happening is progressively our society, our economy is being automated. And that started off in the manufacture of goods, and then it went to the way in which we store and manage information, and now that's reaching how our economy and our society is being organized. And I think if you think about that concept of the fourth industrial revolution, which some of you would have heard about, I imagine, what we then sort of, I think, need to think about is what is actually required to make that work. If you think about all those things that you and I have as a vision for the future, smart cities, autonomous vehicles, robotics, all of these things, that basically wouldn't work at the moment. And I think the reason for that is because we have our basic computing model is one of there being a server which produces information and transmits it over the internet to clients, phones, computers, other devices. And already about half of all of the users of the internet are not actually people, they're machines. Little robots, software bots on the internet. And as you imagine what it would take how much data would it take just to make the city of Zug a smart city, and then you multiply that out by everything else, I think it becomes quite obvious that you need distributed systems for that to work. And then you think, well, how would that distributed system actually take place? Well, you need some means of being able to manage transactions, to manage trust, basically, across a system that doesn't have a central counterparty. Or a central arbiter, or you need to do that more quickly than you could refer to the Google Cloud. And I think one of the things we need to think about is where we are at the moment, which is essentially these, the internet being 4 or 5 big companies and taking increasingly large amounts of value out of the space. What are those things that are going to be the first things, if you like, from an investor's point of view? What are going to be those first things that start being radical transformations? And I think you see that in the evolution of how money is being handled, but I think we're also starting to see that in things like how identity is being managed, how we manage machine transactions, agent-based systems, and then sort of more, I think, things about the automation of contract execution, smart contracts, if you like. We'll talk a little bit about that, but that whole idea that you don't need to have a manual process. Let's just think of it very, very broadly. You don't need a manual process for payments. You don't need a manual process for decision making. It can just be automated. And I think, without getting into all the technical details, that's what we're really excited about decentralized and distributed systems, and that's why we're spending a lot of time and our life's work thinking about it.
Jason, you do some work on healthcare, right? You have some...
Yeah. I'll start by just stepping back a bit. I mean, this is a very, very early stage experimental technology, and I think the way forward for this and how we answer the questions that you raise is we just try lots of stuff and we see what fails, and we do it as quickly as possible and, crucially, as painlessly as possible, which goes to the second point. We were talking before about where the major blockchain just breakthrough use cases really are. My bet on this is agriculture. And particularly agricultural supply chains. And the reason for that is it's the safest place to experiment completely, rather than health or rather than pharmaceuticals or other sort of more difficult, more challenging problems. And you know, it's a huge global industry. It touches everything. It goes everywhere. So you know, how we do this, how we get to that point of trying to figure out what protocols to use, what level of privacy and so on are we willing to tolerate, is we just start in the safest space we can, and then experiment there and work on it. And as with all other technologies that we've gone through, this has always been the case. They're messy, they're experimental early on. The crucial thing is we just want to move as quickly as possible through that phase. And I think, you know, so I think health will be a major dramatic shift in this, in terms of what this can do for the global economy, in the sense of it's one of the most expensive parts of an economy. But we don't start there. That would be crazy. Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily the case that, you know, we have a big speculative mania a year and a half ago, and then in a year and a half's time, everyone's using this stuff. I think what's maybe a little bit has been the thought, or is a thought in a lot of these kind of revolutions, which I do believe we are in, is that you build this parallel, separate, you know, amazing world, and then everyone sort of shifts over into it. I think actually what's much more likely to happen is what we see through the work that a lot of the people here are doing, and a lot of the people in the rest of the space are doing, is a few things that point the way to something interesting that gets then progressively integrated into the economy.